Welcome to SMV4K Public Chat. Today we're going to be talking about how to be a freelancer to make extra money. So a lot of people have the dream of freelancing, of either starting their own company through freelancing or doing it for some extra cash. And we're going to talk about how to turn your dream into reality. And the first thing we want to talk about is, well, what really is freelancing? So what it means is to do something usually aside from your normal job where you're going to earn some extra money. So it's like a side gig or a separate income stream to your primary income. And it's usually something you do on a term basis, so you'll do it little project by project. And it's often not done, it's done almost as if you have your own business, the way it's run. So it usually isn't including a job that you have for somebody else, where you work for somebody else as an employee. So when we talk about freelancing, we have a few different questions, and one of the biggest and most difficult one is how to pick an area to enter. Now, I have with me today a group of guys, some with experience in freelancing in various different areas, and you guys are perfectly welcome to interject anytime you want. And the guys we have today with us is Aiden, James, another James, Justin, Pablo, and they're going to, some of them have questions about freelancing, and some of them also have experience doing it, so they can add their experience to it. As I mentioned, one of the most difficult areas is choosing what kind of market to enter. So if you're a computer programmer, it's kind of obvious that maybe that's the area you'd be interested in. Still, that's a huge area. How do you find a place where you're specifically going to be able to find a niche in the market? If any of you guys would like to comment on that, if you've had experience doing that, let me know. So I found personally that so I didn't enter into freelancing by doing programming, but I have done in the past set up people's websites, and I think that the key when you're looking to freelancing is to look at something that is very irritating to the potential client. So they have a problem that really irritates them and they don't want to solve it, and it's outside their scope of abilities, but something that you can alleviate that irritation. You can cure that pain that they have. And what you're selling them is not so much the service that you're doing as it is a solution to their problem. It's a good way of looking at it, rather than I'm going to find someone that wants me to program, or someone that wants me to design a website, or someone that wants me to build something for them. And it's almost always in niche markets. Well-filled markets don't tend to have a space for freelancers. One of the men that's with us today, his name is Aiden. He actually has a freelancing project where he does organic chickens and ducks, isn't it, Aiden? Yeah, he does organic.
Yeah, I had to turn it off. Yeah, I do. Well, it's called Black Duck Farm, but I do chickens and turkeys, actually.
Oh, with turkeys. Very good. And it's interesting. That's farming as freelance project. It's as a side project, you know. I think that's really something that people wouldn't think of right away.
No, it's definitely a lifestyle business, lifestyle gig, really. I had to really look for what really fit my work constraints and my family constraints, and came up with farming.
Yeah, and I think too, you actually are you've chosen a specific niche. So you have poultry, and I think all your animals are pastured as well.
Yeah, they are definitely. So it's a bit extra work, but it provides definitely just quality food and quality meeting people, and a little bit of extra money on the side as well.
Yeah, and I think it's and a lot of freelancers, they find beyond the money benefit, there's some other benefits too. So, for example, in your case, you're doing something where you mentioned it's a lifestyle business as well. So you have not only the money that comes in, but you have the experiences with your children running the farm. The kids your children, I think, are homeschooled as well, so they get a chance to see the animals growing throughout the season, to understand what it takes to provide food in a modern society for people. And I think that's really important as well, because it gives a kind of, thing that the kids will talk about the rest of their life when they grow up. Gives them a special kind of experience.
Yeah, I agree. I grew up on a little hobby farm. You can hear my daughter in the background there. I grew up on a little hobby farm, and it was, I at the time as a 10-year-old teenager, I didn't really realize and came to fully grasping what great gift that my parents were giving me by having this opportunity. It was my job to take care of the farm animals, and then my parents would just take care of, paying for the food and getting this supply and that sort of thing. So I didn't really grasp until my early 20s how much that really instilled in me a good work ethic, but just the opportunity that it provided.
And you how long have you been raising animals for to sell in this business?
This year's my third year.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's fairly new.
And then third year where I'm at now, and then as a teenager as well, whatever extras we made, like extra eggs that the hens were laying on the hobby farm, that we weren't eating, I would sell that. So I guess a couple of years of sales experience in my teen years as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing, is if you're going to freelance, it's going to be a lot easier for you to or even start a business, a lot easier for you to start something in an area where you have some expertise, somewhere, that is compatible with your current job, or that with a job you've had in the past where you've developed that experience. So you developed a lot of that before you were even an adult, the experience you had.
Yeah, that's true. And then there's also the aspect of whenever you research what you want to freelance in, because I did do some, I did work 5 years in the middle of nowhere, where the winters were 7 months long, and, having to find something to do. So I did research other things that were of interest to me, and every single time I was going online, seeing, okay, what kind of freelance jobs it might be. There was never really anything that was interesting to me. But when it came to farming and farming-related activities, my reaction was always, well, I know this. I can figure something. It was a lot easier for me to at least grasp what maybe the job was, to have a proper understanding of whatever job posting there might have been, and so it helped in that way, perspective-wise.
And it's interesting you mentioned that you did something you're interested in. Freelancing, you're doing that on top of your regular job. So if it's something that you don't like doing, you're just not going to have the motivation to learn what you need to learn, to go and develop it, because starting a business is quite a bit of work, and it's oftentimes a series of, there's a lot of work before there's ever a payout. And people will say, "Oh wow, you're so successful. How did it happen?" And the real answer usually is a lot of hard work, and then eventually I got a break. And it's important to be excited about what you're doing in order to get through that hard work part.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Starting a business, they often, or they being the general business mentors, they often say, you're going to be doing 80, 100-hour weeks, and whatever little extra time and money you have to put back on your business. There's a lot of truth in that. Maybe not necessarily the full quantitative, 80 to 100 hours, but the basic premise of you need to put in a lot of effort, and it's going to take a lot of your time, and it's going to take a lot of your you needing to think about just about everything, because you're the person in charge. And so the aspect of really enjoying what you're doing really comes in handy in that situation.
Yeah, I know someone told me once that the best freelance jobs are when, especially if it's a side gig to your primary job, are ones you would have done for free, and that you can somehow that you also make money with, because then they, it always turns out to be something that gives you benefit. So thank you very much, Aiden.
I agree.
Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah. So another way you can problem with picking an area to enter is that we have to see how jobs are given out in the area we're entering. So if you're picking agriculture, you would have had to research and find out, how do I sell animals? What's the rules? What are the laws? One of the areas, though, you can enter with very little barriers is into software programming. And some of the people listening today are programmers. And it's an area where you basically can say, hey, I'm a software programmer. I mean, I could say that, and no, how can you disagree with me? Only if you can prove I actually can't do the job. The barrier to entry being small, what happens is it becomes sometimes very difficult then to actually find clients. And getting clients is extremely important for your freelancing work. If you don't have any clients, of course, you can't make any money. You can be a wonderful programmer. If no one knows you're a programmer and no one hires you, then you can't do any freelance jobs. So how to get clients? That's really big. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make on that?
My only comment is that I would like to know that a bit more, because right now I'm in a position where the only work I am doing is kind of on the freelance side. That's the choices I've made over the past few months. I really only have one client at the moment, and it's not yet steady work. So getting that kind of feedback would be good for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for getting clients, I know the client you got through network, and it's through networks you created years ago. Anyone who is going to be successful at business is a social endeavor. We can't be in business by ourselves. We have our clients, we have our suppliers, we have partners, and we have competitors. So it's really a very social enterprise. Running a business or doing freelance work is very social, and it will depend a lot on our contacts. The more people that we know, and especially if over our life we've done favors for other people. I'm always eager to do favors for people because then if I need something, they're usually very open to do something back for me. And something that might be easy for me might be considered very important for someone else. And then when they reciprocate, we both end up better off than we were before. And I think the primary thing to do when you're getting clients, the very first thing is to think about who your network is. Who do you know and who do they know? And that will depend on what area you pick to enter. So if you pick an area to enter and you know people in that field, and it really helps if you work in the field. So if you're a programmer and you've got past experience, there's a long history of programmers leaving really large corporations and then working with some of the clients from that corporation on very specific projects that the smaller companies didn't feel they were getting enough attention. They will actually hire an employee out of the big company to come and work with them. This can happen when very special tools are being developed and it's difficult to find people that can work with them. But your past business contacts are very important. This makes it tough for young people. If you're 20 years old, you may not have a lot of contacts. You might have college contacts. And it depends on what kind of business you're going to do. But you got to start to structure that network you have. Write down the names of the people you think you know. And if you're young and your friends are all young, they have parents. Does your friend's parents work at a company that might need your service? And if you've carefully identified the area you want to work in and what types of projects you're looking to do, then you need to work that network. It's an excellent way for freelancers to get started is to go to websites like, I think Upwork.com is one of them, and you go there and bid on very tiny contracts, and you underbid them. And you do that for a couple of contracts. This is if you don't have a network, you should do this. Get some experience there, meet other companies, and maybe the contracts you're bidding on are 100, 200 euros or dollars, and they're things that take you a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours to do. And so you bid on those contracts, you satisfy them very well, and then you've met people in that company who make purchasing decisions. Whoever hired you has the authority to make purchasing decisions, which means that's the person you can sell to. Because this is a huge problem with getting clients. This is a problem with big corporations. They want to sell a concept to a company, and almost no one has enough authority to purchase the thing they want to be purchased. And they have to find the right person. It can take them, the majority of their sales process is finding the right person. The other thing that you need to do is, and this is the very first thing I do if I was going to be a freelancer. So if I'd never done any freelance work before, the first thing I do is pick up this book, Getting to Yes. This book is not very expensive. It's on Amazon, and it's not a really big book, but it's the most important book you will read to help you in business, because it's all about negotiation. So how do you create, and in Latin languages, the word for business and the word for negotiation, it's almost the same. It has the same root to it, and that's because the basis of business is negotiating deals with people. You're trying to figure out what other people need and how you can supply that to them for a price that you're happy with. One thing you can do is look for companies that have a surplus, an occasional surplus of work. Perhaps you have a friend that does contracted programming if you're a programmer, and you can get some of their overflow. It gives you an entrance into the market. And I know people who've done that. One of the Jameses here, he got recently he proposed to a client who he met through his contacts that he had, and it worked out very well because there was prior knowledge of people. People knew each other before, and you're unlikely to get a sale on a cold call as a freelancer. So you're not going to just go out and start sending marketing out to people and saying, hey, I'm a freelancer, come in and hire me. Because big companies and even medium companies, they have a very low tolerance for risk, and you as an individual can be very risky to hire you. Something that helps when finding clients is to work with other freelancers. And that might be counterintuitive, because aren't you in competition with them? But actually, if you work with other freelancers, and you share projects. So sometimes you'll get offered a project that's too big for you to do, or there are parts of the project that are outside of your domain. But if you're working with other freelancers that are perhaps somewhat competing with you, but also they have a little bit different areas of expertise, you guys can work together as a group. And when necessary, you share a project. There are even cases where certain companies, they will require 3 bids. And from being on the other side giving the bids, I know very often all 3 of the companies giving bids are cooperating with each other. So they all work together. And it doesn't matter who gets the bid, the prices will be almost the same. The service that they'll offer is almost the same, because especially if you're in a very niche area, there will be a shortage of skilled experts. And it doesn't matter who wins the bid, it's going to be the same person that develops a system or provides a specialized service. That's also something to keep in mind, that if you have a specialized service, you have to find out who exactly needs that and attract them to you. One of the reasons that I do videos like this is part of my marketing. So people will see this video. They will enjoy the information they're getting, and it establishes me as a subject matter expert. In this case, on how to help people get their business started. So when they're thinking about having a coach, hopefully they'll think about me because I've done these type of videos and the others that are on my channel. And if you're interested in freelancing, it is good to start actually producing something of value. So if you make videos about your area, even something as simple, for example, if you're running a farm and you take pictures of your farm animals and you post them up on Instagram, and you take beautiful pictures of your farm and you post them up, and you know, chickens are almost ready to harvest, and you take pictures of them and say, oh yeah, in another week they're ready to harvest, come make your order quickly before they're all gone. This is a wonderful way of marketing because you're already providing value to people, and they're not yet providing you any value, but you're giving something to them, and this will allow them to then give it back to you by choosing you as their supplier for a service. If you're joining us today and you don't have your mic on mute, could you please mute it? Thank you. Awesome.
Also, one quick thing, if I could interject.
Please.
So you were talking about people you can freelance with. So the contact that I had, he does mostly front end type of stuff, and I can do the back end programming of things. So finding somebody that has complementary skills is also very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that when you get those partnerships like what you found there, that's certainly going to bring you much more than just the one job you got. You know, I can see that turning into a long-term thing. And it's part of the value of networking. A lot of people are against competition. You know, they say, oh, competition causes people to destroy each other and the market is harsh and aggressive. The reality is competition is more about finding out how to help people and how to help each other, but do it even better than someone else. So you will both benefit from participating together and cooperating in that competitive market. So, you know, no, it's a big part of it. Another part of getting clients is asking. About 3 years ago, I saw a Stefan Molyneux video, and he talked in there about if you want something, you need to ask for it. If you're not making the ask, you'll never get anything. And it took me a little while. I have to say, it took me about 3 months to apply that advice. And for 3 months, I thought about that because there was a whole bunch of things that I wanted to change in my life, and I wasn't being asking well enough for them. And when I started to make those asks, I found that almost always people wanted to help me. There were some people that couldn't help me. I'd ask for help. I'd ask them, could you do something? And they couldn't. But generally, whenever people could, they would help me. Partially because I've been helpful to so many people in the past, but partially because people actually get a lot of joy from helping other people. And when you're looking for contracts, you know, everyone that you know, that you trust, should know that you want a freelance job and more or less your area. I mean, a layman's description of what you're looking for. Because it's surprising who has contacts. So my wife, she works with some children's charitable projects, and it has to do with STEM. And because of that, she knows the heads of many of the big technology companies in the country where we live. And she met them as a result of her volunteer work. And this is another way as well to meet people. If you can get in on any kind of an organization where they are, and you can get in front of the kind of people that you want to work for, that's going to help as well. And it's a very long-term strategy. It takes sometimes years to develop those networks. And this is why a lot of people will go freelancing first, and only after a few years of freelancing they do it as they actually create a business. It's not so hard to freelance enough to get by, but to start a business where you have employees, that's a much bigger challenge, and that requires a different level of organization. So it's good to start out with the freelancing, get mastery of that, and then move up a level. Anyone else has any input they'd like to make?
Sure, if I could pop in there. So when you said that you knew of a James who had a particular kind of project, I didn't think you were talking about me because I also have the same kind of thing. The other James speaking up kind of confirmed my suspicion. So I did pretty much the same kind of thing where I knew a guy who did the front end work, and I'm much more of a back end individual um, as far as the programming thing goes. And actually, this particular project that I recommended was very heavily front end with a very limited amount of back end involvement. But the thing that I've really appreciated about the conversation so far is that I can leverage my network to try to get me some more work. Now, it may not happen, it may not come up right away, but the benefit of this is that the contacts that I have are pretty darn well connected and may also get me more work. And also, I'm thinking about adjusting my rate so that I can get more work because I think my rate might be a bit too high right now, which is not a bad place to start because I know where I can go. But that's another. I don't know if that's another topic we want to talk about. If that's a little bit too specific.
Yeah, that would be the next topic.
Yeah. Good segue. Unless someone else has something to add.
Yeah, the pricing of jobs is very complex. There are people. Their entire job is to price out contracts. That's all they do, and they're very often in a competitive environment. The difference between 1 or 2% in price will mean the difference between getting or not getting the contract. As a freelancer, you don't want to bid on those kind of contracts. The level of margin is minuscule, and the potential downside of making a mistake are enormous. So what you want to look for is jobs where you get a premium because people trust you. Trustworthiness in business is very underestimated. The trope is that all businessmen are cutthroat, dishonest, and capitalists. Some sort of crazy capitalists. And the reality is that most entrepreneurs and most freelancers and the most successful ones are the ones who are the most honest, and they get their contracts. They're really profitable contracts you get because of trust. If there's no trust, it'll go to the lowest bidder. But when there's trust, people will say, I'd rather you do the project because I know you're not going to screw me. I know you're going to treat me right. You're going to give me a fair price, but you're also going to make sure that this very important project is done correctly. And that's what you want to look for. And for example, you, James, you've helped a lot of people over a long period of time. And you've demonstrated your trustworthiness to many people, and those people have a lot of connections. And so talking to those people about what your needs are and making that ask, I need to do X and I need to find contracts and this is what I'm looking for. They're going to go out there and they're going to help you. This is more powerful than any sales force you can imagine. As far as pricing jobs goes, you have to look, when you're starting out, you have to look roughly to the market rate, but you can't cheap out yourself. You can't be excessively cheap. The reason is because, think about it like this. So if a man in a van pulls up in front of you, opens the back of the van and says, hey, I got this electronics and it's like 90% off. How do you feel about that kind of situation? Immediately your alarm bells go off in your head and you say, there's something wrong here. This is obviously stolen goods. I'm not going to buy them. So if someone comes to give a project, a price for a project, and they're trying to get it by really undercutting the competitors, or simply by having a way lower than normal price, the potential client will assume that either you really don't know what you're doing, in which case you're not a good fit because they want to make sure the person they hire knows what they're doing, or you're going to be so deeply unhappy with this situation once you find out how much work you actually have to do that you're not going to be able to do it well. A good client, just like a good supplier, has an idea of what's going to be a win-win situation. Now, sometimes there's some negotiation on the details, but it's very important to be able to create win-win situations where everyone feels like they got a fair deal. And if you really undercut yourself, you're not giving yourself a fair deal. And you have to, if they do accept it, that shows that perhaps they don't understand the intricacies of pricing contracts either. And they may not understand the scope of what they want. So I think when you're pricing jobs, the most important thing is actually not the price of the job, but deciding what the job is. That's actually much harder than deciding the price. Is what exactly is the scope of it. And when you're a freelancer, keeping the scope as narrow as you can and creating a proper boundary to what's expected is really key to a successful bid. I used to write really complex and long bids on projects. Weren't necessarily huge projects, things $50,000 to $100,000 projects. I would write a 50-page bid, and it would cover all these details. And all that people would do, I'd go into meetings with them, and they'd open it up, look at the price on the back, because I had so much work, so much words that they had no interest in reading it. It was just too much. And now what I do is I narrow it down to the fewest words possible, and basically I say to them, here is your problem. Your problem is you can't do this thing, or this thing takes too much time, and I'm going to make it easier for you. Okay? And we're going to make this process automated. We're going to automate a process for you. And this is the process you need automated. And this is, you know why this is beneficial to you. I used to go into big breakdowns of why the process was beneficial. Don't do that. It's not necessary. And they already know the pain they have from whatever process they came to you to fix, or whatever project they came to you to fix. And you get an agreement on what the problem is. And then you get an agreement on the scope. Okay, look, I'm going to solve this problem using software. We're going to write a software that automates that process, that solves that problem. I'm going to, if it's maybe you're repairing, maybe you're freelancing, doing small home repairs. Someone needs a door set, or they need a backsplash tile. So you're going to say specifically, I'm going to fix this. It's going to cost that much money, and it's going to take me roughly this amount of hours. And you have to realize that if you want to pay yourself, say, $50 an hour, which for a person who's in charge of a project is very little, you have to charge the client at least $100 an hour, because you have to pay taxes, business expenses. You have to pay, you have risk, because it might take more hours than you thought, which will cut into your profit. And you have to get some sort of profit on it. Otherwise, you could just work at your regular job more hours if they would, if that's possible. You could just work overtime. So you need to be getting something more than what you would get if you were just working your regular job. Sometimes the benefit you're getting from it is not monetary. So you can work that in as well. But you want to find a good balance there. And what's very important on pricing projects, what trips up almost everybody, is that they're desperate to get the contract. You need to be like, this is my price. I'm going to charge $100 an hour for my project. If you don't like it, well, I'll find another person to pay me $100 an hour. Now, if you can't do that after a certain period of time, you might lower your rates. But that might also be an indication that you don't have the correct approach to freelancing. And it's not worth trying to lower your price to get the project, because you start trapping yourself in this cycle of undervaluing yourself, and it's very hard to get out. You're best to start with a higher rate and underpromise and overdeliver. So, you might think it's going to take 100 hours to do this project, and fireworks outside. You think it might take 100 hours, and if if you need to take 120, you do it. But you don't say it'll take 80. I can do it even quicker, and then underestimate it. So that level of estimation is important. And there's no substitute for experience estimating. Now, if you've done a lot of programming, it'll be easier to estimate a programming job. If you've built a bunch of sheds, it'll be easier for you to estimate how much it'll cost to build a shed for someone. So if you've done the job, it'll be easier, but yet there's no substitute for actually writing proposals. And don't spend a lot of time on the proposal. Keep it as simple as you can. basically you let the person that you're contracting with take all the risk. Be very clear to them. I'm a small freelancer. I can't take a lot of risk. If you want me to take a lot of risk, I got to charge a lot more money, and I just don't want to do that. And look for the job where your other skills, your trustworthiness, your attention to detail, and your flexibility to work as a small independent contractor are more important than them getting the lowest price or them getting a massive team to finish the project overnight. So you have to look for where you're going to be more valuable. Did that answer the question about pricing jobs?
Yeah, I think that touches on what I was. Sorry, yeah, I think that touches on some of the things I was thinking about. I also wanted to add on to something you were talking about just now, which around rates, and actually I think maybe my rate's fine after that conversation. But there's another thing to consider, which is, and you do this in negotiation up front with whoever you're talking to, because that just is an object lesson, and anyone who's done programming knows this. If you've done it for even a little while, you know this happens. I had a thing which should have taken me 15 minutes. Turns out it took me about 2 hours because there was a problem down the deep layers of the framework, one that I had written, that was causing the problem. And so I put in something to fix it after I finally figured out what it was, the problem was. But, if I was charging somebody, I said, oh, yeah, I'll just charge you 15 minutes or half an hour to do this work. Turns out that it takes me 2 hours. If you negotiate up front, when you run into problems, now 15 minutes to 2 hours, that's not a big deal. Like in terms of the rate, that's like, if your rate's like $100 an hour, say, that's like $25 versus 200. Seems like quite a lot. Is that right? Yeah. But ultimately, if you're talking, the problem isn't so much that level, but if you said, okay, I've got a 100-hour project, and it's going to take me 120, there's two things there. First, you want to negotiate up front with whoever you're talking to about potentially saying, okay, well, if this takes longer, this is just an upfront estimate, it's not an actual cost. And the other thing is that you let them know as soon as there's a problem. And this may or may not be an issue for you. It's an issue for me because I typically will put my head down, try to get it done. And especially when you work in a salary job, that may not be something that hits you quite so much directly. But if something takes you an extra 20 hours, you can decide to eat that. But if you've already negotiated up front that you're not going to eat the cost, at least not all of it, then you need to also keep your client very much informed. So going through the duration of a project, you need to let them know. And it can be a nice surprise if you over-deliver on a promise. But if something is going to take twice the amount of work, and you don't want to necessarily simply eat that cost, especially if you've negotiated up front.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And a big way you can do that is by saying, these are the assumptions that this proposal is under. I assume, this is very important when you're doing any kind of software development, I assume that you have adequate hardware and network to run this. I assume that you will purchase, that you will have up-to-date software on the base. If you're building something on top of a stack, I assume that you will have purchased the correct licenses to run the stack, up-to-date stack, so that we're working with modern equipment. One of the things that I often say when I'm doing projects is, this is assuming that you have the right kind of environment in which to create. I do educational projects sometimes where we create classrooms with STEM technology for getting kids interested in science, and we say to them, we can install this assuming that you have a room that meets some basic characteristics, and we'll give them, it's boilerplate, it's always the same, and there'll be these assumptions. This way, if you sign a contract, people can't change the goalposts on you because we already have set where the goalposts are, what's expected, and there is always should be the option for clients to add on. You want to encourage clients to add on work onto a contract, but you want to make sure you're getting paid for it. So you say to them, okay, assuming all of these things, we will do this amount of work within this limits. If you want additional work, that's no problem. Okay, what we do is, if you want additional work, we'll either deal with it on a case-by-case basis or so much per hour. And it depends whatever you work out with them. What I like to do even is say to people that we're going to do this in 3 or 4 phases. And you're going to pay phase 1 up front. I'm going to work on it. When it's done, you're going to pay phase 2, and I'm going to work on that. And you can delay if you want the implementation of a secondary phase if you want to for economic or whatever reasons. And I'll even tell people sometimes that if they want to change one of the phases, if they tell us ahead of time, we'll change the work that's expected from that phase and we'll renegotiate. If it's the same volume of work, the same price, but if not, we'll renegotiate it. And a big part of this is not saying no to people if you don't have to. So what you say to them, if they say, well, you make a proposal, it's going to cost $10,000 to do whatever this thing is. And I say, well, we only have $8,000. And you say, well, that's no problem. Okay, we have to take out 20% of the work. What's the part here that's not a priority for you? We'll take that part out. And then when in the future you have more money, because even the basic program is going to save you money. So when you have more money, or when you've got this new capability that the new product gives you, you'll make more money and then you can afford to finish it. So what do you want to leave for later, for the next phase? And every time you can explain things to people that whatever product you're selling them is a part of a continuous process, you will sell more. So if you're helping someone, let's say you do minor renovations in homes, if you're doing little things that things that don't require a contracting license, and you say to them, oh, okay, so you want to have a more beautiful kitchen. Well, how about we start with this? And you start with a small project. This way, if it doesn't go well, worst comes to worst, you give them back your money and end your business relationship with them if it's a very tiny project. But you'll get a chance to understand how they work and if they're trustable. And they'll get a chance to see how you work and to start to trust you with bigger projects. And this capacity to upsell and resell to clients is what will really make you money in the long run, because you'll be able to have work over a longer period of time. Big part of the problem too. I kind of touched on that a little. Sorry, go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, again, reinforcing what you just said, a term for this that you might hear is minimum viable product, or MVP, which is just to say, for phase 1 or for whatever phase, whatever portion of the project you want to do, lay out the try to pare it down to the minimum from your best judgment, and then talk to the client to see if they agree, because that's exactly right. Part of this is, especially if it's a new client or a new project, you want to try to get your foot in the door so that you can say, okay, then we have the opportunity to build on it later. Just like you were saying. So that's all I want to add. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this is pretty universal to, it'll help you a lot if you want to do freelancing, if you've worked in a company where you could accompany the salespeople from your business. So if you're working in a software company, try to get in on sales meetings. See what they're doing. Ask questions. How do we set this price? Like, how do we know what we should charge? How do we do this? How do we do that? I know people that they worked for a company. They became a freelancer as well as continuing their original job. They learned so much as a freelancer that the place they worked gave them a new position where they're going to be involved in doing contracts, and they earned so well on that they didn't continue freelancing. So the freelancing doesn't just give you some money and something to do. It gives you a lot of really important experience, because you have actual profit and loss responsibilities. You're completely responsible for the outcome of the projects. And that on a resume is extremely powerful. It goes beyond management. You can be management and still not have any actual responsibilities over the success of the company. But when you have that profit and loss responsibility, means you've attained a level of responsibility that is very rare actually in most companies. A lot of times it's only the top executives that have those decision-making powers, and you're getting to practice that on a lower level. One of the big issues is about how to get paid. So as a freelancer, you don't have money for a legal team. So if you don't get paid, you don't get paid. And if the company you're doing business with doesn't want to pay you, there's very little you can do about it. And this is why, as James mentioned, first project needs to be a minimum viable project, a product. What's the smallest thing you can do, because you need to build trust. The other thing is that I usually charge up front enough money that if I didn't get paid anymore, I at least don't owe anybody else money. So if I have to have help on a project, if there are material costs on a project or some sort of direct cost to me, at least I have that covered. And this is why, in that case, freelancing, when you have another job, you have the security of your regular income, so you can make that choice. For a lot of things, you're going to want to get paid a third or a half up front. If you phase a project, so you do it in little phases, you get paid usually for each phase up front. Sometimes you get paid a percentage of the total, which tends to be around 10%, plus each phase up front. And you get the last bit at the end when you finish the last phase. There'll be usually something left over. And this is a great way to do it because it allows, I usually when I sign that kind of a contract, there's explicitly in there that if they want to stop the project at a certain point, then they don't have to do the rest of the phases. And that's good for two reasons. One, that shows that I have so much confidence that I can deliver something that they're going to want to get all of it. And it gives them a certain sense of confidence that they can get into a bigger project with me without fear of it going sideways and being stuck having to ride it to the end when it's not working well. So yeah, getting paid is pretty important. And the most important thing to do, if you want to be paid, don't work for free. Just refuse it. And be strict about it. Say, I'm sorry, I can't work for free. You know, I need X up front, or I need whatever it happens to be. If you're working with partners, make sure your partners get paid first. That is because in the long term, you will get a lot more work from your partners than you will from the client. So if something happens, you make sure your partners are paid as well. That doesn't mean you need to work for free or take a loss yourself, but what it means is when you're figuring out, you know, got to pay my partners. So whatever I get up front, that's got to pay them. I got to pay myself. I got to pay my expenses. And then if there's something after, it's the profit of the project. So it's a good way. You got to look out for yourself. You know, when you work for a company, there's someone there to look out for you to make sure there's a paycheck every month. When you work for yourself, you got to be the one that does that. Has anybody here ever had a problem getting paid from freelance jobs?
No,
Yeah.
but I ended up having one in the past where I screwed things up pretty bad, and I decided I was going to refund all the money they had paid me, just to restore the basic, you know, not even trust at that point. It was like, I can't accept the money. I don't feel right about it.
Yeah, and that's I would do business if someone did that to me. You know, they messed up, but they refunded me. I would do business with them again. I might be more careful about which project I gave them to make sure, you know, it wasn't beyond their ability or whatever. But the level of trust I would have in that person, in business, trust is more important than anything except for networking ability. And network is based on trust. So it's very, very important that you build trust with your clients. And something that there are things you can do which will immediately signal that you're not trustworthy. So, you know, if you're late for things, if you're late for a delivery of a project and you've warned them ahead of time, that's different. But if you're unexpectedly late, even for meetings, if you don't respect their time, if you don't approach it professionally, and if you don't charge enough, and if you don't charge enough upfront to make sure that you're getting paid, that sends a signal that either you're unprofessional or perhaps you're not trustworthy. There are companies or freelancers that have been known to way underbid projects so that they can get into companies to get access to special information, which they then use to defraud the company. And so companies are actually quite suspicious of if you're deeply below the market rate, they're suspicious of that, and that would trigger some alarm bells. And like I said before, they're concerned about creating a situation that you're not happy with, and then you won't be able to deliver because you're not happy. So I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about was work-life balance. This can be challenging if you're a freelancer. If you're a freelancer and you have a job and the freelancing is on the side, the problem is that how much free time will you spend on the freelancing? You know, if you're going to say, okay, I'm gonna work 4 hours a day every day when I come home. That means, you know, you're working 8 hours at your job, you're working 4 hours when you come home. You probably have a couple hours of driving, 14 hours a day. Doesn't leave you a lot of time for a personal life. And for some people, that's just a no. That's not possible. If you're going to do it, you can set a time. I'm gonna do this for 3 months. I'm gonna push myself really hard for 3 months and get something launched. Or I'm going to work Saturday and Sunday every weekend for 3 months, and I'm going to launch this new idea that I have, and start doing some sort of freelancing. But you really need to put some limits on it. It can become all-consuming, and it can prevent you from developing other areas of your life. If you're a freelancer and that's all you're doing, that's your full business, you have to have some control over your time. You know, you need to make sure that you are not up at all hours, working all the time, because if you lose your work-life balance, you're not going to be able to do your job properly. It's going to really impact you. And it's just a matter of making a good schedule and sticking to it. You're going to get more done if you have a schedule and if you manage yourself. For a lot of people, it'll be the first time they ever really manage themselves is when they do freelancing. And there's a good reason why freelancers or ex-freelancers or ex-entrepreneurs are in high demand in business, is because they have that capacity. Even if their business failed, they have the capacity to risk, to try, to discipline themselves, to make an experiment. Part of that work-life balance too is knowing when you need to take a break from freelancing. So there's no shame in, you freelance for a year or two and you say, yeah, I'm kind of tired. I'm going to take a couple of months and just work my regular job. That doesn't mean you're done freelancing. It's just a break. So if you need to do it, do it. Go ahead and, feel free to do that. That's part of the advantage of freelancing, is you're in control of what you do. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I kind of have one.
Go ahead, James.
So at what point, say you really start to take on freelancing, pretty much, you get it to a point where maybe it could overtake your normal job. Is there a good point to know maybe when when it might even be a good idea to bring somebody on almost as an employee?
Yeah, what I usually did when I'm freelancing is I will get other freelancers in my network, and I'll say to them, okay, I got this project, will you help me? My wife does this quite often with our educational projects. She'll have other people that work in very small educational companies, and she'll say, hey, can you come and help us with the launch of this project? And they'll help us out for a week or two, or whatever, with the launch of a new project. And they get that, they do it a couple of times and it works out so smoothly. It's like having an employee. The advantage is you don't have to worry about their taxes. You don't have to worry about what kind of a employment contract. You don't have to worry about insurance. It's all up to them. There are some laws that if you contract them too many hours a year, that you may have to count them as an employee. But definitely in the beginning, experiment with it. I would say experiment with employees before you need them. So as long as you're not going to run a loss on a project by experimenting with an employee, do it, but make the experiment small. We talked about a minimum viable product earlier. And you can kind of apply the same principle. What's the fewest number of hours I can have an employee while learning the skills of managing them? So if you hire someone to work with you on a project for 20 hours, you'll probably learn a lot in that 20 hours about how to manage people. And then the next time you do another project and you need someone for 20 hours, you're going to be way better at it. But if you hire them and you say to them, okay, I have a 200-hour project and you're going to help me, you're stuck with them for a few months. And that can, if you don't get it right the first time, that can be very, very challenging. And as far as something that reminds me of too is, when should you take your freelancing gig and turn it into a company? And there is a big difference. Freelancing is just you. When you're going to turn it into a real company, it's not a smooth transition. Like you don't have one person, that's you, and then add a second and then add a third. There are people who do that. That is not a very, you're not going to make any money on your first employee or two. There's a certain minimum number before you really start making more money than if you had no employees. You take on those first employees because you need their help, but you probably won't make any more money. And you have the risk of having to employ people, and you have to go out and sell more and collect more, and it can be a snowball. What I've seen, the most successful startups that I've seen that have employees start up with roughly 5 people. So there are 5 key positions. And often all 5 of those people were freelancers as well, and they're all working on similar projects, and they have some experience together, and they get together to form something new. You need someone that, I call it the father of the project. That's like the CEO who's going to be he's going to make the hard decisions. He's going to help work out disagreements between the group, and he's going to fulfill that fatherly role. He'll be the energy as well behind the project. Usually the person that forms the group ends up being the father. You need the mother of the group, and that's the person that makes sure that everyone in the group is emotionally, psychologically, physically taken care of, to make sure that people have what they need to do their job. If there are resources they need, she's the one that advocates for them to get them, and basically fulfills a motherly role. You need someone that is a money management expert, that can make sure that the company, and this is something you can actually hire out to. Certain accounting firms will be able to do this for you. You need someone who is an excellent salesman, because you by yourself, you can sell, if you've got some basic sales skills and you're only doing it as a side project, you'll sell enough to keep yourself busy. If you're living off of it, maybe you sell enough to keep yourself busy, but if you got a bunch of employees, you need a salesman. You just can't do everything. So you need a salesman who's top notch, and then you need a tech guy for whatever technology you're working with, whether it be anything from construction to programming. You need someone who's an expert in the field. And basically, if you have those five positions filled, you shouldn't have a problem going from freelancer to successful company. You really don't want to stay in that valley between just you and 5 people for very long. It's where most small businesses fail. It's when they take on employees. It's usually when you fail.
Okay, and then also, and make sure it's the 5 people, not like combining any 2 roles into one person.
You can't combine those roles. It's too much work. That's the problem is the psychology is different. So the psychology of the person who's going to be the salesman, he needs to be extremely extroverted. He needs to be outgoing and out meeting people and networking. If that's also the guy you have that's in charge of, say, technology, that's not the frame of mind that usually fits well with the tech expert. And besides, even if it does, you need someone else selling while the other person is developing product for the clients. And it's just not possible. And once you have that 5, you can go to 20 really easily. And up until you get to, depending on the country you're in, somewhere between 50 and 100, you can go from 5 up to 50 or 100 pretty quickly. if you have the right 5 people.
I would also, this is not like a statement of knowledge, but just sort of kind of a guess as to what you might need. If you're going to get to that point where you say, okay, I'm going to get together with 4 other people who can fulfill these roles, I mean, that's a point in time where you need to talk about, obviously you're taking on a bunch of risk for these people. They're taking on some risk as well. But then you're also going to be talking about, like, what's your plan? You know, you have to come up with like a lot more information, like, you know, how are we going to actually get to having the cash? What's the plan to have the cash flow? What's the plan to sell the product? And I think that's probably also part of why you need, if not actual direct employees, you need consultants or some other people to get these ideas and make sure you have that plan together. Unless you're really good at the planning, in which case you may not be good at, say, the sales. That's just sort of my thought that I had. Does that sound ring true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. A lot of people that, most people have heard of, you get a startup, then you go and you get, a lot of people will borrow money. Most startups don't get investment capital just because they're not good enough to get it. Those that do get investment capital, people don't realize, but you go out to and get investment capital, half of it is because you want money, but the other half is because the investment capital comes with, obligatorily, they won't let you get away without it, 1 or 2 mentors. So it'll come with some people. The people that gave you money will also give you someone to mentor you. And this is hugely helpful. You could call these the grandparents of the project because they're not involved in any daily operations. They don't have decision-making power in the company, but they're there to help you. And they're there to help you with their network, because they're usually people that have had a lot of experience in the industry. They're there to help you understand where you should be investing your startup capital. They're there to help you get along with each other, because you might get along with someone until you start a business with them, and then you find out you don't get along. And sometimes you can still learn to work together anyway. And you need those mentors. And there are people who will do it if you don't have investment capital and you're just doing a startup with your own money. There are people who will mentor you. There are people who will mentor you for a specific size of company. You're still tiny, you're a startup. Get a startup mentor who's got experience. Find out what other startups, successful and unsuccessful, the person mentored, and coach them. It's kind of like a coach, but more involved. You don't just see them every other week. Or every week. It's a little more involved than that. But yeah, that's really, really important. Your company doesn't exist in a vacuum, and you need sometimes people that's standing outside of your corporate structure that can say to you, hey guys, I know you're in love with this product, but there's no market for it. But if you did this and this, you could find a product that had a market. And there's no, that kind of experience, there's no substituting for it.
The other thing I would just like to mention, and it just sort of popped up in my head, I think there probably are organizations that exist on that continuum of just yourself to 4 other folks, to 5 people total, but they're probably more akin to like partnerships where basically everyone they kind of like gather together as a group of contractors or a group of freelancers. I think you maybe touched on that earlier.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to think, like, I'm not particularly interested in creating a corporation. And also the other thing is with a startup, you're talking about a huge investment of time. And I guess that kind of touches on the other James's question or comment about, when do you bring on employees? Because that is a very different question, obviously, than the whole freelancing enterprise.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of I would say most entrepreneurs did some freelancing, and then they eventually got skills that they turned towards a company. But for when you're really small, rather than forming together, if you start a company with people, it's almost like marrying them. You're going to spend a lot of time together. Your finances are tied. Your whole life is tied up with the people you started a company with. You start a startup, you're going to be there all the time. You just don't have time for any other life, and that could last for 10 years. So I completely understand why people wouldn't want to do a start. I wouldn't want to do a startup of that type. But when you're really small, rather than taking on employees, usually it's better to have, like you mentioned, other freelancers that you work together with. And you need to get good at coming up with ad hoc agreements. So we're going to work together on this project. I'm in charge of the project, which means I take a part off of the top of the project, and you're going to be responsible for this, and you for that, and you for that. And we're going to work together on it, and you just bill me for your hours, or you bill me for, I need you to complete these tasks, and I'm going to pay you $1,000. Is that good for it? And you'll find out some very quick ad hoc ways of working with people, and you'll have to come up with a group that you can trust. This is why it's very important to get out and meet other people in your network. I know where I live, there's every couple of months there's some sort of tech festival where people get together, and there's a lot of this crosstalk with freelancing and gestation of new ideas, and they have a chance there to meet the kind of people you'd want to partner with. Good. So I think we've covered quite a bit. If you want more information than this, there are a million books about startups you can read. Try to look for ones that are focused on the tiniest element of a company you can, and focused on doing it cheap. That's one of the last things I want to mention is don't spend money on your startup unless you really think it through. You know, I'm thinking, do I need to buy more lights for my studio? Nope, I got cheap. Whoop, I just hit one. I got cheap lights. That's going to do for now. There will come a point where I invest in a better studio. But that has to come according to the growth of my project. You also need to do the same thing. You need to justify any expense you're going to make. Run lean, run inexpensively, and work on your network. And keep working on that. And remember that not everything you do has to be for money. There are a lot of times you're going to want to do things to create future potentials. So there's a lot of stuff you do that's not actually paid work and that you need to do in order to create your freelancing future. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the guests today and for your comments and your questions and your testimonials and examples of what you've been doing. If you enjoyed this message, I would urge you to subscribe to us on the channel below and join us at smv4k.com. The real magic happens when you get one-on-one personal coaching. Please share this message on social media and support us using the links below. Thank you.